Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and today you are in for a treat. I'm going to be interviewing Carey Nieuwhof in his brand new book called At Your Best. It's going to really help you take your life from where you are to where you want it to be. Carey challenges my presuppositions. He gives me incredible things to think about, and you're going to walk away from this interview with a whole new perspective on how to be productive, how to be creative, how to live the life you've always dreamed about. Stay tuned because it's going to be amazing. Carey, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on. This is a subject, your book, At Your Best. I love the subtitle, How to Get Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor. This speaks my language because I've been studying and teaching here in Hollywood on productivity and creativity for probably 20 some years. And so this is right up my alley. I go back to, remember Merlin Mann and the 43 folders website?
I actually do not know that reference. No.
Oh man, that's an early productivity guy. And then there was David Allen, who you talked about getting things done. He's like the guru out there. But this has really been driving me for a long time. So I was fascinated. And the way you approach it is an entirely different thing. And I really love that. It's much more simple because I'm a creative guy.
Right.
I'm not a planner. Excel spreadsheets scare me. Early in my career, I actually worked with a guy who spent the first 2 hours of his day just fixing his to-do list. I mean, it was magnificent. He had it on a legal pad. The problem was he had a great to-do list, but he never really accomplished anything. So I just see such extremes on this productivity, creativity scale. And so, hey, just let me say, this is the book. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm going to encourage everybody I know to read it.
Thank you, Phil. You know, it's a little intimidating because it's almost like writing in the diet space or the exercise space. It's like, or a cookbook. It's like, hey, people have been here before. This is not a new idea. So it's like, do I really have anything to contribute to this field? Because you're right. Some of the best books, we were talking about Greg McKeown before we started, like his Essentialism and Effortless, and Cal Newport is in that field. Juliet Funt just released a new book. David Allen is a legend. I had an opportunity to spend about an hour and a half interviewing him recently. Wow. And like, he is like, you're right. This is not virgin forest. People have been here before. But the problem I found, and listen, I've learned from everyone I've mentioned and more. So it's not like, but I'm like, how do you do it so that it actually just works in real life? Yeah. And like, you don't have to sort through 500 pages and 79 spreadsheets and, recalibrate everything. And, mine comes out of a personal pain point where after a decade of leading a church full time, I burned out and I had to rebuild my life. And I came up with the system that I thought was for me. And then I started sharing it with other people and they're like, oh no, that works. And I'm like, really? And then spent a few years refining it and try to make it as not simplistic, but just accessible. Our mutual friend, Andy Stanley, says, memorable is portable, right?
Oh, that's good, yeah.
If I got to keep going back to the blueprint going, wait, I hate assembling stuff. I don't know about you. Yeah. Do you like it when you get like the stuff in a box, you got to put it all together? I just hate it.
Absolutely not. No,
and I got to look at the stupid diagram like every 30 seconds. And it's like, oh, that was backwards. So now I got to take it apart, do it over again.
Right.
And I thought, how do I make it memorable, portable, and easy to work? So the book's been out for a few weeks now. And I had taught it in prototype for years before writing the book. So kept working on the ideas. And what's really cool is people are seeing overnight results. They're reading the book or listening to the book in 2 days. And like the next day, they're seeing immediate return. So that's been really gratifying. And I'm so excited to see it.
So tell me a little bit about the personal pain point. I mean, I understand you reached a point where you just had a real crisis and realized, okay, I've got to change something about my life because this is not going the way I wanted to go at all. I mean, how serious was it for you?
It was pretty serious, Phil. I was around 40. So that was about 15 years ago. And I had been leading for a decade and it had been 10 years of growth. Not like crazy, like $0 to $100 trillion, that kind of thing. But in church world, it was like a handful of people to 800, which doesn't sound like much. But for me, that was the most I'd ever led. And I had a stupid equation, which was more growth equals more hours. And that doesn't scale. And it's funny because I'm a high energy person. I'm an optimist. I'm an Enneagram 8, if you follow that stuff at all.
Yes.
So large and in charge. And people kept telling me I'd burn out, and I didn't believe them. I thought I was tired, but when you're really tired, Phil, you don't know how tired you are. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that just becomes normal for you. And then one day when I wasn't expecting it, my body's like, we're on strike. I'm done with you. You pushed me too hard for too long, and I lost all my energy. I lost all my passion. I lost my joy. I had brain fog like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
And there was nothing wrong with me. It's just I had pushed it into the red for so long, so hard, my body just kind of quit. Greg McKeown ironically opens up a much more serious, opens up his book Essentialism with a much more serious case of a guy who I think he was in the hospital for like a year or two with just severe burnout. So I wasn't hospitalized, but it took me 4 or 5 months to even be able to feel my heart again and see a flicker of hope. And if you burned out, and some of your listeners will have burned out, you never want to go back. Right. And I don't know if you have enemies, but if you do, you wouldn't wish it on them because it's terrible. Yeah. So I had to figure out, the pain was so deep and it was so terrifying because normally as a control freak, I kind of know how to get back. It's like, well, that didn't work, so I'll try this. Nothing was working. When you're really burned out, and that I've learned since is the classic definition of burnout. Yeah. If you're tired, you go to bed maybe for a couple of nights on time and you feel better, or you take a vacation and you feel better. I did all of the above and nothing made me feel better. Wow. So it was time and the grace of God 4 or 5 months after I hit burnout where I started to slowly get better. And then I'm like, well, I can never do that again. So I hired coaches and counselors and read books like David Allen and others. Yeah. And tried to figure out, how do I recalibrate my life so this never happens again? And that's where the system for At Your Best came out of. But at the time, it was just for me. It was a personal prescription that I had based hundreds of counseling and coaching and reading hours together, combined with trial and error, going, okay, this works. Yeah. And at first I felt better. And then I started feeling better than ever. And then I started being crazy productive. And I'm like, oh, this really works. And that's when people started to ask me, well, what's going on? Like, how are you getting it all done? And I'm like, well, no. And they're like, what? No, break it down. And so in 2015, I did for the first time. I was, Mark Batterson invited me to speak to his staff in DC. So I flew down there and I spoke to his staff and I gave the very beta principles of what would become At Your Best. And he pulled me aside right after. He goes, Carey, you gotta, this is gold. Put it into a book.
That's
so
great.
I did a course, taught it to thousands of leaders, talked on it around the world, kept refining the ideas, listened to feedback, and now we got a book.
Well, it's interesting that there's a lot of people listening or watching that they're not old enough to realize what work was like pre-internet. In the pre-internet days, I remember when we left work at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I didn't even think about work until 8 a.m. on the next Monday. I mean, we went home, we played with the kids, we mowed the grass, we went shopping, we watched a football game. We had a different life back then. But as you've said, back then we went to work. Today, work comes to us because, largely because this thing we carry around in our pocket all the time. And as a result, this burnout thing happens because I think we could never really get away from it. I know people that they will answer their phone every single time it rings. I have one of my best friends is a Broadway actor in New York City. He said in the middle of a major show on Broadway, a guy in the middle of the audience, his phone went off. And Fred said everybody in the theater could hear him say, hey, I can't talk right now. I'm at a Broadway show. I mean, everybody in the theater. There's some people that just feel compelled to respond to every email, every text message, every phone call. And it's not going to be long before that completely burns you out.
Oh, it does. I mean, you can look at the neurology of it, and I'm not a brain scientist, but I mean, we are not wired. Like the brain is a muscle. David Allen just actually updated Getting Things Done after 20 years, and he's got a whole section in the new edition on brain research. And he says science is now proving a lot of the stuff that he observed anecdotally. And I found the same thing over the last 15 years. I just realized that as a human being, I cannot function if I am constantly on. all the time. Like what I get paid to do is produce ideas. So when I was a pastor, it was to care for people and to produce really quality sermons. These days, I run an online content company. And so I'm either interviewing people, being interviewed, writing books, writing articles. That like requires deep work. It requires focus. It requires mental alertness. It means you better have an idea, or you shouldn't be sharing, right? So that requires rest. And we don't think about it that way in the white collar work world, office work, because we think, no, I'm an automaton. I'm a robot. I can just go. As long as I'm awake, I can produce. But if you think about like pro athletes, like you play, games are very short. You don't play in the NBA for 7 hours a day. Right. You play for a very limited time, and you may not be on the court that entire time. Hockey sometimes, pro hockey, it's like 30-second shifts, 90-second shifts, and you're not playing 7 games a week. So even Major League Baseball, 2 or 3 hours, but they're not running. Soccer is like very intense, short burst of energies, and then massive rest times. Well, I'm not saying we should work for 20 minutes and then take a month off. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is if you work 18 hours a day, I have a guy I know who, not at a Broadway show, but he had a BlackBerry back in the day in the mid 2000s, right? When those were all the rage. Yep. And he quit his job, was totally burned out. And I had a BlackBerry at the time too. And if my BlackBerry rang, he would get triggered, like literally PTSD. Like if he heard that sound, and some of you have that, like if you hear an iPhone ringer, you're like, oh, PTSD, right? It's like, I can't do it. So here's a little secret. This is fun. Years ago, I discovered Do Not Disturb. All of my devices are set to Do Not Disturb. Yeah. And what that means is nobody gets through. Well, that's not true. My sons get through. My wife gets through. A handful of other people. And what was really cool, Phil, it's fun that we're having this after the book released. Literally days after the book launched, September 14th or whatever, Apple introduced iOS 15. On iOS 15, now have different Do Not Disturb modes. Yes. So you can program your phone so that at work, these people ring through. At home, these people ring through and nobody else gets through your wall. So when you're at work, theoretically, okay, your boss and maybe your family gets in. But then when you go home, you can switch it to 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. Right. Nobody gets through except the people that you choose. So that way your phone operates, because communication is always sent at the convenience of the sender. Right? True. If I email you, I'm emailing you. If I'm calling you or texting you, it's convenient to me. I have no idea what you're doing. You could be sound asleep. You could be out at a restaurant with your spouse and having the time of your life or celebrating an anniversary. Like, I don't know. And so that gives you control. And I would say to that guy on Broadway, if you don't burn your phone, at least set it to Do Not Disturb. Like,
Totally.
Crazy.
Nuts. Well, it's funny. About a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, I had a glitch happen on my email program where I had like 65 emails in my inbox and they all just disappeared. To this day, I don't know what happened or where they went. But you know what? My life didn't end. I'm not out of business. My clients didn't leave me. It was a real revelation that I don't have to respond to everything. It's not going to be the end of the world. We just have to be more assertive and intentional about the fact that we're not living our lives at other people's convenience. And it sounds rude, maybe, I don't know, maybe harsh, but we just don't have to respond to everything.
Well, can I share a story with you? I mean, sure. First of all, that highlights another principle, which is at some point you and I will be dead and the world will be fine without us. Like, believe it or not, Phil, it's not going to grind to a halt and people will get on with their lives. Yes. So there's that. But I did an experiment this past summer. I decided to take a full month off and not cheat, not do an hour of email in the morning at the beach. I've done working vacations. Actually, the first draft of this book was done on a working vacation in 2019. And it wasn't a good draft and it wasn't a good vacation. So it's like, that's the end of working vacations. But in July of 2021, I decided to take an entire month off. I got a good team. I trusted them with it. I'm like, you guys run the company. We'll see if it's there when I get back. I think it will be. And they did a great job. I put an autoresponder on my email. Okay. And I said something like, hey, I'm trying to practice what I preach. I'm taking a month off. I will not be reading any emails when I get back. If it's important, email me again in August. Now, my assistant went in there. There was also a clause that if it demands an immediate response, Carly would check in once a day or whatever. Anyway, I get back July 30th. I think it was August 3rd. I took a couple extra days. There were 2 emails I had to pay attention to after a whole month that Carly hadn't handled or my team hadn't handled. And then do you know how many hey, I'm deleting all these because they were all gone by the time I got back. You know how many people actually re-emailed me in August saying about that thing I sent you in July? Could you now look to this? Take a guess.
Half.
One person. Phil, awesome. One person.
That's awesome.
Isn't that crazy? It's okay, so
really
what? There would have been normally, that was my private inbox. It would have normally, the public one gets hundreds a week. Mine would have gotten dozens a day.
Yep.
All that wasn't that important.
That's crazy.
And yet we are chained to it. We say, I got to check email on Saturday. I got to do it on Sunday. I got to do it at 5 a.m. I got to do it when I'm watching Disney Plus with my kids. And it's what is it? We are addicted to this stuff. And you're right. When I was in law, I worked in it for a year. To take a file home literally meant you took the manila file home. And, if you did that and you lost it at the law firm, that was a fireable offense, because all of a sudden, if you left that on the subway or something like that, you've got confidential client information out there in the public. So, I don't think I really took a file home ever. Maybe I did it once. And that's right. When you're home, you're just home. It's what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to eat? What are we going to watch? Who are we going to see? And you couldn't work. And now the problem is you're in this gray zone where you're never really on and you're never really off. You show up to work tired, you're shopping on Amazon, you go home, you're answering email. It's whoa, let's separate.
Never ending. No, unbelievable. All right, now I want to get to something that really gets me going, and that is what time of day you're most productive, what time of day you're most creative. You did a great job making it visual with the green, yellow, and red scales. I just love that. That was a brilliant idea. I have to say, about probably 20 some years ago, when I discovered this, it revolutionized my life. The idea of finding that portion of the day when I absolutely rock. I remember back then I had a day job. I was working for a production company in the Midwest, and I realized that from 6 a.m. to noon, I can be wildly creative. Now, as you say in the book, there's really only 2, 3, maybe 4 hours in that window that we're at our super best. But somewhere in that span from 6 a.m., I'm a morning person, to noon, I can really rock. And I actually would come into work. I had a regular, you talk in the book a lot, which I love, about how do you deal with it when you're not the boss and you can't design your day and you can't control your calendar? I actually would come in 2 hours early. I would come in at 6 a.m. before everybody else came in at 8. And where there was I didn't have my kids around. The phone wasn't ringing. There weren't distractions. And I wrote my first 2 books in that 2-hour window every morning before work started, because I knew that 2 hours at my best time of day is better than 6 or 8 hours any other time of day.
It's a great way
tell
to
me
say
a little
it.
bit about how you develop this whole scale and, morning people, afternoon people, evening people. How important is that?
Yeah, it's really important. So everybody gets 24 equal hours in a day, but they're not all equal. They don't feel equal and they don't produce equally. Exactly what you're saying. And, full credit to you for discovering that decades ago. I'm also a morning person, but the principle, there's all kinds of material out there on, you got to be a morning person. And if you're a night owl, like you work with a lot of creatives, I find a lot of creatives tend to be night owls. Do you find that?
Totally true.
I don't know why. People who do what I do, a lot of morning people. But if you're a night owl, and you're trying to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and follow Phil and Carey's pattern, it'll be a disaster.
Totally.
My son has a girlfriend and mornings are not her specialty. That's okay. She's great in the afternoon. I found out half my team is afternoon people when I was writing this book. So there is Daniel Pink has categorized people into morning people, larks, owls, and then everybody in the middle. And most people are actually in the middle of the day, but so we have to talk about this, because I remember that in the book, and I wrote it down. Daniel says 14% of people are morning, 21 are night owls, and 65% are middle of the day people. I'm stunned. That is not my experience. Maybe it's because I am working a creative business. Everybody I know is either rock star hours or they're early morning people. I don't even know what you do in the afternoon. I could do phone calls, meetings, travel, but nothing I create, nothing I write, certainly
is going to be worth a thing if it happens in the afternoon. I'm baffled at that. That's really interesting.
I'm really baffled at that too. I trust Daniel's research. I mean, it's very well done. I think, because I've done dozens of interviews like this, and I'll often ask the interviewer, you morning person or whatever. And so many of them are morning people. I wonder if because you deal with a lot of artists, a lot of creatives, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if we self-select in that kind of, people who end up in the C-suite or in the executive suite end up being morning people. And then, the whole, I love that rock star lifestyle. Yeah. I was reading about the Rolling Stones. It's like, I can't do 3 a.m. Like maybe to get up early to catch a flight, I can do that. But to stay up till 3 a.m., like I got no brain cells left. No. So the whole idea is, and I find maybe a lot of other people are just like, I'm awake by 9 a.m. and by 4 o'clock, I get a little bit tired or whatever. So again, there's no wrong answer. The point is, don't try. I do think there are morning people advantages. That's another subject for another day, but don't try to rewire yourself if you don't need to. Just understand that you're going to have, and again, brain research will back this up. The things we've discovered about the human brain in the last decade or two. Yeah. Cal Newport says about 4 hours is your maximum amount of time that you can do deep work in a day. And I find most people have 3 to 5 hours where they're really at your peak. So when are you at your peak? Ideas flow freely. You're creative. You're doing your best work. If you're writing, it goes quickly. If you're editing, they're beautiful edits. If you're a coder, like one of my sons is, your code is fantastic. It hasn't got errors in it. If you're a people person, you do meetings. Your meetings are great. They're full of energy. You're brainstorming. You're helping people with their problems. So I call that your green zone. So just think of whenever those 3 to 5 hours are, that's your green zone. Yep. Red zone is, for me, that's 4 to 6 p.m. If you're asking me to do serious work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, good luck with that. It's probably going to be a piece of crap. It's not going to be very good writing. If I'm making decisions in meetings, I'm making bad decisions at that point. Yeah. It's like, well, let's just cancel that. And then the next day it'll be like, who came up with that? Well, that was you in that 4:30 meeting. Okay. Yeah. You said cancel it. It was a stupid idea. What you should do then is you should take a break or do something really low stakes. Clear your inbox. Fill out that expense report, whatever doesn't really matter, just get that out of the way, or have a nap or go for a walk. And then everything in between, green and red, like high energy, low energy, mid energy, that's your yellow zone. And that's where you can do, for me, podcast interviews, meetings. Like you're not at your best, but you're not at your worst. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just, if you're trying to write, I say that as a writer, it's going to take you a little bit longer and it probably won't be as good, but you can still get a lot accomplished. So your whole day, and I offer people a clock where they can actually plot this out, their personal energy clock, green, yellow, red. So my green zone is about 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. And if I'm lucky, I get another shot after lunch. And then my red zone is 4 to 6 and everything else is yellow. And so what you should do then is do what you're best at when you're at your best. So that takes us to the second part is there are only, like for you in your company, you could phrase it as highest value work. Or when Cooke Communications is doing great, like what are you doing as the leader, the founder of your company when your company is really doing well? What is the most valuable thing you can do? We'll do a little consult here, Phil. What would you say?
Well, I don't, that's a good question. What is the most valuable? I find that me connecting with the leaders we work for, we're a creative services company. So we work with clients, we work with nonprofits, ministry organizations, churches. That's kind of our wheelhouse. So I find that connecting with those leaders is really important for me. My team is fantastic at editing and shooting and producing stuff and consulting. But for me to find out the vision and the heart of that leader, that's really critical for me. And so that's where I need to focus my creative time trying to do that as much as possible. Now, I'm like you too. I'm writing books, I'm writing scripts, and that's the biggest challenge. Okay, so let's jump into it. I didn't want to do this.
No, this is good.
Here's my question for you.
This moves it from theory into real life.
You're really good and you're great at the book at that issue of, okay, if I'm not the boss, how do I deal with this? If I can't control my calendar, if I'm being called to meetings, let me throw you my situation.
Okay.
Because Cooke Media Group is a creative services company, so we have to be at the disposal of our clients. When they call us, when they have a crisis or a meltdown, I have to be there. The other thing is I'm on Pacific time. I'm in Los Angeles. Yeah. So many of our clients are on the East Coast, which means when I go in the office at 9 a.m. for work, they're having lunch. Half of their day is gone. And so this idea of don't check your email first thing in the morning, swallow the frog, do the hardest thing you have to do first, which is brilliant. Tim Ferriss is a big advocate of that. And I think it's smart. I can't do that. Because if I'm not checking my email pretty quick, I'm in trouble. The third thing is I travel all the time. I'm on a plane at least once a week. So if I had my druthers, if I had a normal work day, I would carve out that morning time to write scripts, write my books, focus on the creative stuff, really intense stuff. But I can't. I'm constantly constantly having problems trying to carve out that time. Even when I work with my assistant and say, now, Victoria, we're going to totally block out every morning, for my creative time. Even then, it's almost impossible because I'm either on a plane or I'm getting a meltdown. So what I've kind of done, you tell me if this is smart, I've at least started the minute I get out of bed, I grab my phone and I just scan my emails. I need to see if there's an emergency, if there's a meltdown somewhere, if a client's having a problem, so I can respond to that if necessary. If there is no meltdown, great. I'll put the phone away. I don't check my email for a while and I'll focus on my writing. That's the best thing I can do. Otherwise, my day is pretty screwed up on a regular basis. As a creative person, it's just really hard for me. So I don't know.
I think that's fair. I don't talk about it in the book because I do generally advise against spending your prime hours, your green zone. If you're doing work like if you're an assistant and your job is answer the public inbox, then you should be using your green zone for that and dealing with difficult clients. But for most of us, that's not our highest value work. I do not have a problem with scanning Slack, scanning email, scanning your text messages to see if anything is burning down. Yeah. That's no problem. But you can probably figure that out in 5 minutes?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Even less.
10 minutes.
Even less.
Yeah. 5 minutes or less, you can do that. And then you're like, okay, no panic.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about that. Right. And then you can focus. As to the travel, the travel's a big deal. So I've been using the system for years. And I was traveling over 100,000 miles a year before COVID hit. So I've been grounded for 18 months. Some of that is by choice. Some of that was just global pandemic stuff. Plus I'm international. I'm Toronto based, not US based, but most of my clients are in the US. So what I have done is really reevaluated moving forward. Do I need to be on the road as much as I am? Because I find it very inefficient. I've produced more. Company has had a record year. And my staff would say I'm a better boss. So I think, what I realized, I would have said, I have to do these events prior to the pandemic. And then we all got grounded, at least for a period of months. Right. And I'm like, more is in my control than I think. And that leads us, you've hinted at it a couple of times. What do you do if you're not the CEO, if you're not the founder, if you're not a solopreneur? The point is to focus on what you can control, not on what you can't.
Good. That's
so
good.
A little bit of math. Work, it's different for everybody, but let's just pick a 40-hour work week. 40 hours out of 168 hours gives you 128 hours that you have total control over. Your boss is not telling you what to do on a Tuesday night. There's no law that says you must go to 5 kids' sports practices on the weekend, right? Yeah. That's all your choice. And we feel trapped by our choices. We start by making our decisions and then our decisions make us. And then, so we're in this jail. It's like, well, wait a minute, let's just stop. I have complete control over about 128, 118 hours a week. So even if you're boss, you have no control at work. But then you go into, if you work at a coffee shop, you don't have a lot of control over when you sling your macchiatos. You don't have a lot of control over that. But if you're in an office environment, a knowledge worker environment, and I've pulled hundreds of leaders on this, and I'll ask them, how much of your 40-ish hour work week is command performance? You must be in this meeting, in this office, at this time, with these people. You have to do this at this set time. The average answer is 5 to 12 hours. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I want to pick a worst case scenario. Let's say one of your listeners is like, yeah, but Carey, at my office, it's like half my time. I have to meet my boss at this time. Then I have a creative meeting that I have to be in. And then there's the meeting nobody wants to be in. And that happens Wednesday afternoon. So let's say that's 20 hours. And I've never heard that answer in the wild from anybody. Let's say it's 20 hours. If you have 20 hours, that is command performance. That still gives you control over 88% of your week. That's only 12% of all the time that you're going to spend in the week. So that means you can do probably what Phil did, which is maybe you can show up at 6, or if you're an evening person, show up at 10 and stay till 6 at night or 8 at night, because eventually the 3:30, 4 o'clock people will all roll away. As to the time zone, I have thought about that. That's just a challenge. And it could just be, I work with West Coast clients. It comes the other way because I'm ready to finish my day. And, 4 o'clock, I get a text from LA. Hey, do you have 15 minutes? And I'm like, I was about to hop on my bike. Okay. Yeah, I got 15 minutes for you. I think that's just one of the tensions you got to have. And the other thing you can do is you can set I don't know whether you've done this or have thought about it or whether it's possible, but you could tell your clients, hey, being Hollywood based, I'll be getting back to you most days at 3 to 5 Eastern. Or something like that, where you just set parameters and that predicts a little bit of time. See, the challenge under this is a lot of us spend our days living reactively. In other words, we kind of have a plan, but we just respond to everything. Oh, I got a text. Oh, this person slacked me. Oh, I've got 17 unread emails. Oh, I've got this. Oh, someone knocked on my door. Oh, somebody wants this. Oh, now. And so then you're like here and there and you're doing it. And again, technology, as you said, has made that much more complicated, because in the old days, it was like someone knocked on your door, called you on a landline.
Yeah.
That was it. And now there are dozens of ways to interrupt you. And so a lot of us just fly from other people's priorities. And if you don't decide ahead of time how you will spend your calendar and your time, other people will decide that for you.
Totally. Someone once said that if you spend most of your day sending and receiving emails, you're spending most of your day responding to other people's priorities, not yours. And that is so, so true. So let me ask you this. How do you say no? Give me some techniques. Give our listeners some techniques for how do I start saying no to some of these things so I don't feel like I'm constantly being sucked into other people's priorities?
I would start by asking yourself the question, what is the most valuable work I can do? And I see that as a concentric circle of like a Venn diagram of 3 circles. So on the one, it's gifting. What are you skilled or gifted at? So you were probably client relations and content creation.
Yeah.
And certainly strategy and vision for your organization, right? For me, it's producing excellent content, whether that's books, podcasts, articles for my website. It's clear vision. It's an aligned team, and it's having the funding to do what we're called to do, right? Yeah. To make sure we're profitable. True. We can keep the lights on at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
If I do those 4 or 5 things well, everything goes great. If I take my eye off of those things, we start to flounder. So ask what is the most valuable use of your time, and so it's gifting, passion. You love doing it.
Yeah.
And impact. Is it actually moving the needle forward? In other words, when I do those things in the church, if I preached well, the staff was aligned, and we had the money to do what we needed to do, everything went great. If I took my eye off preaching well and I let my sermon slide till Saturday, we were in trouble. And you weren't in trouble on week 1, but do that for a few months and you're in trouble, because people just are like, I don't even know what he said anymore. I'm leaving. Yeah. So figure out that. And then that should be how you spend your green zone. That should be how you spend your time. So that gives you a reason to say no. And then what you can do, because I get a lot of opportunities like you do, I'm a speaker. We say no to about 95% of the requests that come our way. Not because I don't want to do the events, but because if I did those events, I would be accomplishing other people's priorities, not ours. Right. And I would have no life. I'd be out 7 days a week, meeting 7 days a week. Like there's a lot that come in. So what do? If you can say this with integrity, and I can 90% of the time, just say, Phil, thank you so much. I'd love to do your podcast. It's a real honor that you would invite me. Unfortunately, in light of all of the commitments I've got right now, I'm not able to do it. I wish you well. And thank you so much for asking. Sincerely, Carey.
That's great.
That's fair, right? Now, I could do your podcast, decided to do your podcast, but I mean, that's not an offensive answer. You don't even have to give a reason. You don't have to say, You could say, hey, I'm out of town that week. But then what that does is that gives people the opportunity to say, well, what about next week? Or what about the week after? And we kick the can down the road 2 more weeks. So I think that's it. And then the other thing, this is a paraphrase of what Greg McKeown said, but rate the opportunity on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, oh my goodness, I would pay money to do it. 0 being no way. Most of us are pretty good at getting rid of 0 to 5. It's like, I don't really want to do that. Not a good idea, bad idea. Right. But our lives are filled with 6s, 7s, and 8s. So Greg McKeown suggests if it's not a 9, it's a 0.
Oh, well.
If it's not a 9. And another way of thinking about that is if this was happening tomorrow, would I do it?
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. That's really good. I love that. Well, the thing that really appealed to me about the book is you give us how do I put it? You encourage us to adapt these principles in a way that works for us, because everybody's different. Everybody's facing a different circumstance. Everybody has a different schedule. And these are absolutely brilliant principles that will change people's lives. But we have to kind of figure out, okay, which ones work for us? How does it work for us? I know 6 or 8 years ago, I thought, because I travel just, 150,000 miles a year. It's nuts how much I travel. And about 6 or 8 years ago, I had a meltdown, and I just thought, if I have to get on a plane one more time, I'm going to kill myself. And it was like God spoke to me very clearly and said, yeah, but you're not very good at anything else. This is what you do. And suddenly I had this moment of revelation. So I realized, okay, I got to figure this out. So I bought into the club. I got the airport clubs where I could go work while I'm at the airport. I bought really nice luggage because that's my office. I live out of my luggage, and my briefcase and stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm going to adapt. So I've embraced it, and it completely changed things for me. So I do think customizing your situation, taking these principles, using them in a way that helps people individually is really life and death. That's what makes it work.
Well, and that's one of the challenges I had with some of the other time management stuff that was out there. It's like, use this system and it will work. Well, everybody has a different circumstance. And so what I worked really hard at in the book, I give examples of my life and other people's lives and how they use the system. But it's designed to work whether you're a stay-at-home parent, a CEO, your entry level in an organization. I've even got some keys on how to talk to your boss, right? If you're like, you want to get out of a meeting, or you want to shift your hours, or you want some flex, like that takes some skill. And it's like, well, here's some tools that you can use to talk to your boss to make your situation different. So the hope is that people will learn to live in a way today that will help them thrive tomorrow. The other thing that I talk about is time off. Time off won't heal you if the problem is how you spend your time on. So the bulk of the book is basically about what we do during our work life, so we actually have a life and work doesn't eat it up. But, with your time off too, you've got to design it in such a way. Like, I have hobbies. Mine are, I call them the 3 Bs. I developed those after I burned out, because in pre-burnout, I had no hobbies. So it's bicycling, boating, and barbecue. And on Saturday, I was 3 for 3. I did all 3 in the same day. It was great. But I'm not telling you to go buy a bike. I'm not telling you to get a big green egg and start barbecuing. I don't care. It could be photography. It could be lying on the beach. It could be reading books. It could be macrame. It could be, I don't know what it is. You could do Norwegian, sail rigging or something like that. I don't care what you do. Just do something that takes your mind off of, I better look at my phone. I better empty my inbox. Like, you've got to find something that is life-giving to you. And so I hope you can do it. And the principles are designed to be applicable to anyone's life.
All right. Last question. Once you've learned these principles, once people have read the book, they've got this down. What I discovered is it's a day by day slogging it out in the trenches over the long term. It's one thing to know I need to do my creative work in the morning. It's another thing battling the phone calls that come in, battling changes in schedule. I have to fly to Atlanta. Any advice on how to make this a long term, how to master it for the long term?
Yeah. So I'm 15 years into it, thereabouts, and I am tweaking it all the time. And the book was written with that in mind, that this is an approach to life and to your life, because what'll happen is if you go through materials in the book, you'll come up with a system. It's working great. And then you find out you're pregnant. You're pregnant. It's like, oh, we got a kid now. What do we do? Or you take a new job, or you move cities, or your new neighbor moves in and he blasts death metal, every night. And you can't get to sleep at night anymore. Or your team grows or it declines or whatever. And so for me, over the last 15 years, it's been a constant adjustment. And so actually the last 2 or 3 chapters of the book are designed to help you continually tweak things wherever you happen to be in life. And, even like you're not talking about the pandemic too much, but everybody's schedule changed radically overnight in March of 2020, and then gradually changed back, and it's going to change again. And so the idea is you're constantly calibrating. I'll give you that sounded very ethereal. So I'll give you a very clear example. I have learned, and I'll show people how to do this in the book. I have a meeting cap where I realize, for me, not for anyone else, 12 to 15 meetings a week, commitments a week, and this would be included in that number, is my ideal zone. If it's more than 15, I get overwhelmed. If it's under 12, I get bored and probably am going to become a juvenile delinquent at that point. Okay. So I need stuff to keep me busy, but if it's too much, it's too much. So that was years of observation. But what I realized is about 2 weeks ago, and it was book launch season, I had 21 commitments in a week. And by Friday afternoon, I was ready to jump off a cliff. And I talked to my assistant about it. And she said, Carey, you have 12 next week. I'm like, okay. Well, I had a good weekend. I got through it. The next week, which was last week, was fantastic. This week, I have my 12 to 15. I'm going to be okay. Now, your meeting might be 28 meetings a week. I don't know, Phil, or it might be 8. It doesn't really matter. But the point is you have a number. Yeah. And also another part of tweaking the formula is amount of time spent on the road versus time at home. You probably, I don't know whether you know this number, you probably have a maximum number of miles or flights a year. Yeah. And you have a minimum number.
I've never really pinned a number to it, but you've challenged me. I should do that.
I would go over your last 5 years, take 2020 out because it was so weird. Go over your last 5 years and say, what was a good year? Like 2017 was amazing. 2021 was a little intense. 2018 was a bit boring. We didn't do well, but there's probably a low level where if you fall below it, your clients aren't served well and your company isn't healthy and you're not having fun. There's probably a max at which you're like, I'm going to kill myself if I get on a plane again. Yeah. And somewhere in there is your sweet spot. So then what you do, like mine now, post-COVID, 1 to 2 commitments that take me on an airplane a month. Okay. I did a week before COVID where it was 2 days in Orlando, a day in Dallas, and then an event in LA. And I flew back and taught at my church on the weekend. And that was just normal. And I felt great. But now that I've been grounded for 18 months, I'm like, my wife is like, Carey, you're so much more alert when we're together with people. Like you're a different person. I'm like, okay, well, moving forward, I'm going to lower that number. And maybe in 10 years, it'll be higher. I don't know. Yeah. But you can constantly tweak. And that's what the system is designed to do.
Well, it is a system. And the book is At Your Best, How to Get Your Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor. And I'm going to talk about this a lot on the podcast, and I'm going to steal some of your stuff. I have to tell you right now up front, because it's fantastic. Man. And well, the thing I love about you, Carey, is you challenge my presuppositions. You're constantly making me rethink what I thought was working, what I thought was locked in stone. And that's a great thing. I'm just, and I'm also quite jealous. I have to say, I have some issues with you because the stuff on your social media is brilliant. You're tweeting stuff and I'm thinking, why didn't I think of this? This is great stuff. So I just love following you, and I encourage people to follow you on Twitter, especially, and Instagram and Facebook. You're putting out great stuff, encouraging stuff, challenging stuff. So keep it up. I just love what you're doing.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
I really appreciate you. And you know what? Life's hard enough. Why make it harder than it needs to be? And so At Your Best is about just taking some of the pressure that doesn't need to be there out of people's life. And wouldn't it be great if we could live in a way today that would help us thrive tomorrow? That's my heartbeat. I appreciate you. And thank you so much, Phil.
You're brilliant. Thank you. That was a fantastic interview. I'm always challenged whenever I'm with Carey, and I'll tell you, his book, At Your Best, How to Get Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor, is just a great thing. I think you should get your hands on it. After our podcast, we were talking that sometimes the simple approach is best, and his approach, the book he's written, has had people change their whole life in 24 hours. And so you can grasp this. It's not deep, it's not detailed, it's not process-driven. It's just a great way to grasp these principles and move on with your life. Again, thank you for tuning in. Share this with friends. If you have friends that are reaching burnout stage or frustrated, or they just really need help getting their life more productive, more creative, this is an interview they need to hear. So share it. Please comment. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And I'll tune in and see you next episode.